The green coupe left the quartet standing by the gate and chugged along the narrow road. The way rose gently, twisting through the narrow canyon. It followed the course of the creek, sometimes crossing it only to recross it farther upstream. The narrow bridges were rickety, and Mulvaney eased the coupe over them with trepidation. He felt like Alice in Wonderland. Things were getting curiouser and curiouser. He didn't pretend to understand what was going on here, what subtle cause prompted the people of the valley to bar their town to strangers. Mulvaney recalled the words the service station proprietor at Lastwater. He had stopped there to get some gas. Yeah, right. A queer bunch up there, the fellow had told him, gnawing a generous chunk from a plug of tobacco. Holed up in that valley since God knows when. Nobody ever goes to Wareville. Them that does come right back. Never say nothing neither. Shame to get run out, I guess. He laughed sharply and leered at Mulvaney. He glanced sideways at the girl in the seat beside him. Beyond a certain amount of resistance, she had displayed no peculiarity that he could discern. She had seemed tense on the journey across the desert, especially after they had passed the cowboy, but that seemed gone now. She laughed, and the tips of her teeth showed white between red, half-parted lips. Only her eyes were the same, almost ingeniously blank. And the men at the gate, a sinister feeling shook him. Their eyes were the same. It baffled him. He could not know that his own bore the same look. Or he could. It's all very confusing, he said, drawing the words from nothingness. She smiled briefly. I suppose it is. Shadow hovered over her full, soft mouth. There's no reason why you shouldn't know, she said slowly. As long as you're one of us. Her acceptance of him as one of the people of the valley comforted him, at the same time that it repelled him strangely. He steered the coupe expertly around the curve, waiting for her to continue. It's the ranches, of course. He nodded. That explains the cowboy. She divined what he meant. Yes, he recognized me. I suppose he did anyway. I'm in Lastwater frequently. Everyone for miles around is there at one time or another. We're poison around here, Mr. Mulvaney. Cut the formality, he said. You don't look poison to me. You slime bag. Oh, hey, kitty. Hey, bug. Oh, no. You're one of us, she said simply, as if that explained everything. There's been a kind of feud between our people and the ranchers for more years than I can remember. It's more bitter now. So bad you have to guard the road to keep strangers out? ? Of course. Besides, the moon is full tonight. We're particularly careful now. Mulvaney furrowed his forehead. Rangeland hate must be at fever pitch to make them fear an attack in the night. Whatever side the girl was on, he felt, must be the right side. So he pictured the ranchers as inconsiderate monsters. Yeah, you're in, buddy. The walls of the canyon sloped and fell away. The green coupe thrust itself... Lizzie. I'm going to call it Lizzie. Lizzie thrust herself around a bend and into as beautiful a valley as Kenneth Mulvaney had ever seen. The valley bottom was a prairie, perhaps a mile wide by twice as long. The creek meandered through its middle, bisecting green and yellow fields with its line of standing cottonwoods. On either side, pine-clad slopes rose steeply, steepling up toward the head of the valley. The quick glance Mulvaney cast in that direction chilled him. A mountain guarded the valley's upper end. Even in the sunlight, it had seemed somber and brooding, like a giant wolf frozen in solid... like a giant wolf frozen in solid granite, overshadowing the valley with its baleful presence. Mulvaney spared it another quick glance, and the feeling it inspired in him increased. He shrugged, avoiding looking at it, turned his attention to the valley. A quarter of a mile ahead, a small aggregation of houses glinted in the rays of the westering sun. Details were hidden in the foliage of many trees that sheltered the town. "Wareville," said the girl. "It isn't much, only a dozen or so houses, a general store, a blacksmith shop, population 63. Whoa. Like nowhere. Grazing cattle were brown dots in the fields around the town. Wheat stood waist-high, rippling with golden waves on either side of the road. The blaze was sun-fierce and mellow at once. The green coupe Lizzie steamed into Wareville like a comet preceding a fanned-out tail of tan dust particles. Go Lizzie. Most, if not all, of the town's population was gathered in the square in front of the general store. Mulvaney braked Lizzie to a halt near the tail of a bay mare tied to a hitching rack. The mare's flanks were covered with dust and sweat. The animal was winded as if from a hard ride. Mulvaney squinted through the insect-spotted shield at the group facing them. Sullen and expressionless they were. Some of the women were fiercest in their looks, as though resenting his intrusion into their town. The female of the species has the more protective nature, he thought. Yeah, did you? His eyes caught sight of a familiar figure in blue denim, loafing in the foreground. Jim, the man at the gate. A short cut, Mulvaney thought fleetingly. Jim had taken advantage of it to ride ahead and warn the villagers of their coming. The girl opened the door with a shrill screech of metal and got out. What a strange girl. The crowd kept silent. An elderly man stepped forward and the girl greeted him. "I'm back, Dad. Joan, who's that fellow with you?" She explained rapidly as Mulvaney got out beside her. Then she caught sight of the man who had ridden the mare from the gate. She stopped abruptly. "Why, where's Jim?" No. "Why, there's Jim. He could have told you." "He told us what this fella said. How do we know it's true? Maybe it's a trick." Mulvaney felt seriously uneasy before the menacing look of the crowd. There was something about them, a wolfish ferocity held in abeyance, that made his flesh crawl. "Look," the girl cried. "Look at his eyes!" Mulvaney felt the intensity of the crowd's gaze focus on his face. He was embarrassed. "I can prove I'm Kenneth Mulvaney," he said. He brought a packet of papers from the pocket of his jacket and held them out to Joan's father. Hoofs clattered across the square. Mulvaney looked up and met the fierce, lupine gaze of the man on the back of the stallion. The beast reared and its rider leaned out of the saddle, seized the papers from Mulvaney's grasp. Prick. "Oh, look at these." The village people fell back with respect and awe. The horseman was darkly, cruelly handsome, black eyes darting over the papers he took from the packet. It contained Mulvaney's birth certificate, a picture of his parents, and his mother's diary bound with a faded blue ribbon. The man held the picture out for the townspeople to see. "That's Todd Mary, all right," agreed Joan's father. The attitude of the crowd changed perceptibly. Their expressions became friendly, all but the lupine rider of the black stallion. He passed the packet back to Mulvaney. He roamed his glance possessively to Joan. Mulvaney felt his scalp tighten as the probing stare rested on the soft, warm curves of the girl's body. The eyes came back to Mulvaney. Thin lips smiled sneeringly. "It takes more than credentials to hold your It takes more than credentials to hold your proper place in this valley, Mulvaney. We don't run alone here. With these cryptic words, he wheeled the restive, wild-eyed stallion and galloped away across the town square. That's really dramatic. Who does he think he is? Mulvaney queried resentfully. Bock Martin, Joan said quietly. Bock's a hard fella to get along with, her father added. He held out his hand. My name's Jordan. Welcome to Ware Valley, Mulvaney. Mulvaney shook his hands. Thanks. I'll probably not stay long. I just came to find if I had any folks living here. You'll stay, Joan said, peering at him. Mulvaney could not describe the look, the queer lack of expression that went on. No. The queer lack of expression that was in her eyes. Few ever leave, Jordan went on. Those who do generally come back, unless something happens. He turned to his daughter. Find out anything in town? The place was practically deserted. Even the priest was gone. Where's your horse? Leave it at the gate? Mulvaney lifted his head. The girl had been walking when he picked her up. She shrugged slightly. It's dead. One of the ranchers shot it. Shot your horse? A sigh went up from the villagers. Yes, I was taking the shortcut through Baxter's Canyon. A man was hidden behind a rock and he shot my horse. He shouted that was just a warning, and I heard his horse's hoofs as he rode away. I never did see him. Jordan's face was stony. He put his arm around her. What did he say, honey? Her lip curled. Said our kind wasn't wanted in these parts. Said we better get. Jordan pulled thoughtfully at his chin. They're gathering against us, he muttered. That priest! He shook his head somberly and took Mulvaney's arm. I suppose you'll want to move into your old home, lad. It's just like your daddy and mother left it. I'll take you there. That's nice. Before driving from the square, Mulvaney cast a glance about in search of Joan, but she had slipped away with the dispersing crowd, and he did not see her. Mulvaney was not surprised to learn that the house his parents occupied was vacant, waiting for him. He was not even surprised to discover that it was clean and well kept in spite of the 20 or more years it had been separated from its owners. The people of the valley looked after their own, he thought to himself. We figured they'd come back sooner or later, Jordan told him. We kept it ready. No, Mulvaney was not surprised. There was something about the atmosphere of this strange valley, its town and its people, that produced the possibility of such feeling. Long shadows had begun to... Kitty, don't you do that. Don't bug. Long shadows had begun to steal across the valley from the bottom when Jordan left him in the large frame dwelling that was his birthright. He stood in the middle of the worn carpet in the living room. Outside the window, the leaves of a dusty cottonwood fluttered in the evening breeze. Mulvaney brought his glance inside with an effort. He looked lingeringly over the old-fashioned furnishings, a sofa, a platform rocker, a couple of straight-back chairs, what-not shelves in the corners loaded with bric-a-brac. It was here, in this very room, amid these same surroundings, he had played when he was a baby. He was home. You right, bud? He was home. He took time out to think it. Don't jump on there, Buggy. Don't jump on there. He was home. He took time out to think of that. Home. He had lived from his 6th to his 18th year in an orphanage. The following 7 years he had spent wandering from job to job, never long in one place, never one to make friends. He had always been restless, unquiet. Was this what he had hunted all those years? Without knowing it, he was home now. He sat suddenly on the sofa. It creaked under his weight. He rubbed his hand over his eyes. He had driven quite a distance today. He was tired. He wasn't hungry at all. twilight came to the valley. Gloom rushed in to fill the corners of every room in the house. Mulvaney stood erect at last and groped his way to the lamp he had observed earlier on the dining table. He struck a light and held it out to the oily wick. Odd people, an odd place. He resented Bock Martin. Like the shoes. He resented, let's call him Doc Martin. The way he had looked at Joan, he saw the girl's lovely young face in his imagination. A pleasant tingle passed through his flesh. He held the lamp high to light his passage up the creaking stairs. The whole place was wrong somehow. He felt it even more strongly now. He couldn't place the wrongness. Gave him an eerie... Well, I thought he liked it there. Gave him an eerie feeling, though. Hang on, buddy. In a bedroom upstairs, he placed the lamp on a dresser. The wick flared, casting grotesque flickers throughout the room. He leaned forward and scanned himself in the glass. He was Kenneth Mulvaney, just as he always had been. He would not have been surprised to find himself different, too. He recalled Joan telling the crowd to look at his eyes. He squinted, frowning. There was a difference there somehow. They seemed to lack their normal luster. The look of them reminded him of the Valley people. It was the look that characterized their eyes. Man, this is a little long-winded. He could not understand the significance of this fact, but it troubled him. He turned around to survey his surroundings and reeled with the discovery. Sweat gathered on his forehead as he recognized now the wrongness that had haunted him. It had been the same with Joan Jordan, with the Valley people, and now himself, his body as hard, physical, opaque as ever. Hard. Did not cast a shadow in the shine of the lamp. One takes the shadow for granted. To be without one is. Mulvaney did not know the portent of it. He was shaken with the discovery. He blew out the lamp quickly and got into bed in the dark. No shadow. The argent moonlight splashed through the window, fascinating him. A full moon rising above the road. No. A full moon rising above the ridge along the eastern rim of the valley. Its orb lighted the land with a weird, eldritch illumination. It lay in a puddle on his floor and rose with a silver tide along the opposite wall. The moon glow soothed his senses. He believed his imagination was overwrought, maybe a touch of the sun. He drifted hazily in the shadow borderland of consciousness. 5 miles over the ridges and tangled ravines from Kenneth Mulvaney and his troubled thoughts. Big Sam Carver shook his grizzled white head and gestured with mahogany hands. "If you ain't right," he rumbled at the small, dark-skinned man, "we'll be in a mess. Ever been a laughingstock?" The small man was dressed in black, white collar turned back to full. He was a priest, and his name was Father D'Arcy. "It is my duty to stamp out evil where I find it." His appearance and accent marked him as French-Canadian, which is very specific. "How long have you had this trouble?" he went on. Carver shrugged. "Maybe 2 or 3 years. We've always had trouble in winters, when the snow drove the wolves out of the mountains. Before we drove our critters to summer pasture up in the mountains. Don't figure we lost many then, but the ground's barren up there anymore." "The ground's barren up there anymore." What? "But the ground's barren up there anymore. We pasture 'em in the valleys all summer long, and that's how our trouble comes. Never knew wolves come down to the foothills in summertime. Yet you think I may be wrong. The wolves attack only when the moon is full." "Seems like it's always happened that way," the rancher responded wearily. "Full moon last month, and the month before, and before that. There's a monstrous pack of them. They run a terrific lot of good beef. They ruin a terrific lot of good beef. I know! Financially, the wolves are hitting you hard, but how about tonight? Don't worry, every rancher in these parts is ready. I'm riding out to join them pretty soon. The water? Yeah, crazy idea though, the priest shrugged. You have supplied yourself with a mirror? And the silver, you did with it as I ordered? Yes, my God, didn't I tell you we'll be laughing stock if you ain't right about this? The priest made a steeple of his fingers and regarded the structure with calm meditation. The Lop-Garou cannot withstand these things, he said. The rancher nodded weakly. If I ain't crazy now, I'm going to be when this is over. I'd as soon think those folks in the other valley was sicking their dogs on our cattle. Though I've no doubt they've had it in somewhere as... What? Very likely, agreed the priest. Course Yancy had no right shooting the girl's horse out from under her today and leaving her afoot in the desert. I gave him the bloody devil. The sooner those people leave these parts, the better off we'll be. But I don't truck with shooting horses out from under women. That's good. Getting back to the wolves, Mr. Carver. You don't really suspect those are dogs attacking your cattle? No, Slim says they ain't dog traps. Slim used to trap wolves for bounty. When he says wolf, I have to believe him. You have set traps for these wolves? Of course. And the wolves avoid them, I know. They have the cunning of man. Have any of your riders ever seen these wolves? Sure, shot at 'em too. Missed. Perhaps, reflected the priest. Perhaps not. You don't miss with silver. These lops grows. You better be right, the big rancher murmured. He stood up and combed his fingers through his shock of white hair. Hateful damn business. You staying here, Padre? I'm riding out to meet the boys, see you when I get back. I will still be here, the priest said, smiling confidently. Okay, good. And I'm confident we're done for the evening. As we go, bit by bit. I guess we still have a fair way to go. I mean, we'll get there. I don't know. It's not the best weird tale I've read so far, but it's okay. I hope you're enjoying it. As crappy as the readings are, it is. Yeah, it's 12:15. More wine for me, and as I've said, it's gonna be water and weird tales for a while. Yeah, my heart's just not in it tonight. Thanks for watching.